Welcome to another Luminar AI tutorial. I'm Darlene with Digital Photo Mentor. In this video, you're going to learn how to correct some common image problems. Things like lens distortion and perspective control, chromatic aberration, removing unwanted elements from your image, and more. If these terms are unfamiliar to you, not to worry. I'll explain each of them as we go along and which tools I'm using to correct them in Luminar AI. This is day 5 of my 5-day photo editing challenge. If you've been following along from the beginning, kudos to you. We're almost at the end. If you miss a few days, you can sign up for free. Just click the link in the upper right corner of the video now. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you get notices when new videos are available for you to watch. Let's get started with today's lesson. If you've been following along from the beginning of the 5-day challenge, you'll recognize this image from day 2. So we're going to continue where we left off after we adjusted the contrast. So just to give you a refresher and jog your memory, the original image had a lot of contrast and was losing detail in the highlights and the shadows. So in day 2, we did some steps to control the contrast and bring detail back. The only other step I want to do on this image is to correct some of the perspective and distortion caused by using a wide-angle lens here. Whenever you're shooting looking up at a building or shooting architecture, you'll get what's known as perspective distortion. So it looks like the top of the building is tilting in or becoming more trapezoidal instead of straight up and down all the way to the top. There's a couple of ways to correct for that inside Luminar AI. First of all, scroll all the way down to the bottom to the professional tools. And the first one on the list is lens and geometry. You'll notice that there's a tick box called Auto Distortion Correction. So I'm going to turn that one on first. So you see what it's doing is it's correcting for the barrel distortion or the edges looking rounded that a wide-angle lens often causes. You can see that it's stretched out the corners, and let's do a before and after to see what that's doing. Okay, so it's done a nice job of sort of making the building straighter. That's step 1. If you wanted to go a little farther, you can use this slider down here, but I think for this one it's done a nice job. So I'm going to close out of lens geometry and go up to the essentials panel to the very top, back to the composition AI tool. Now I already had done some cropping on this image and used the perspective button, this first one here, to correct the tilt or the lean of the building. So the left button under the perspective section corrects the horizon tilt. So if you're shooting handheld and you didn't quite get the horizon level, that's what this one is for. The other one is for that perspective control that I talked about where the top of the building is becoming tilted in. So I'm going to push this button and let's just see what the program does. Okay, so did you see it sort of tuck in the bottom of the building a little bit? And if we move our mouse up here, okay, so if you just click it like you're going to rotate it on the corner here, you'll get this grid. Take a look at the verticals, and I can see on the building, because there's these nice wooden slats, I can see that they're all perfectly straight up and down, and the top of the building is the same width as the bottom of the building. So it's done a really good job. The only thing that happened is I've lost the bottom of the motorcycle here. So I'm just going to zoom the crop out a little bit more, give it a little bit of space, like that. Let's take a look at the final image after doing these distortion corrections. So before and after. So these are really simple little corrections, and sometimes I do them and sometimes I don't. I'm not an architecture photographer, so I'm not really sort of concerned about the tilt or the perspective, especially if I'm doing things like street photography. But if you are, those are the tools that you're going to want to use to correct it. Let's move on to the next image. You'll notice that I'm in the composition AI tool once again, and I just wanted to make note here that I've used the perspective tilt correction to make sure that the verticals are straight up and down in this image. Because I don't have the horizon, it's not looking for horizon levels to be straight. It's looking for things like the edge of the steps here and the columns. So if you have an image like this where there isn't a horizon, it will work for this as well. So I just wanted to show you that. What we're going to work on in this image is removing some elements that we don't want. I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom. There's 2 ways to remove things. Erase tool is one. I'm going to show you that in a different image. The other one is a clone and stamp tool, which is under the professional tool panel. at the very bottom. It's the very last one. Now you'll notice something immediately. As soon as you open it, all of your corrections and edits disappear. Okay, not to worry, this is what happens when you use this tool. So it's going back to the original raw file to make those edits, and then what will happen is all of these changes you've made will then apply on top of that so it blends in better. So what we're going to do here is we're going to remove this little leaf. I'm going to zoom in to 100%. I always recommend working at 100% when you're using the clone tool or the erase tool so that you can see up close what you're doing. The next thing you'll notice is that there's a little message in the middle of the screen telling me what to do next. It says click to set the source. So what that means is it's going to clone from one area and stamp those pixels into another area. Like some of the other tools and the masking brush, you have the ability to change the size. That's the radius slider. So you'll see that as I move it, both circles get larger. You have softness once again. So remember, softness is distance between those two circles. So the inner circle and the outer circle, that's the fade area of this brush. Okay, so the smaller the fade area, the harder edge brush you'll have, which means that the easier your retouching could show up. So I generally leave this softness quite high because then your edits will fade in a little more gradually. Opacity depends on what it is that I'm cloning. In this case, I'm going to lower it to about 50% and I'll show you why. So the first thing I need to do is click here to set the source. It's reminding me again. So I get this little target tool. I'm going to choose over here. So I'm going about the same distance away as the size of the leaf. I'm going to click here on this moss. Okay, and once I do that, you'll see that I now get my brush or my stamp. Okay, so that's a bit large. I want to have this tool just about the size of the leaf, or the inner circle about the size of the leaf, like so. Okay, then I'm going to start with the end of the leaf. You'll notice that as I'm moving this around, this source over there is not moving. Okay, it's where I've set it. But as soon as I click, they now will lock together. Okay, so once I click here, it moves along with me. Did you see that? So now I've cloned over half of the leaf. Okay, be conscious of, if I keep going, what's going to happen is I'm now going to start cloning the beginning of the leaf onto the second half. Okay, so now I have to go back and reset my source. So you do that by just clicking the Alt Option key on your keyboard. So I'm going to click back on the moss again. Then I'm going to go back to the middle of the leaf and complete the rest. Okay, can you see why I did that? Because if I kept going, I would actually get the start of the leaf cloning over top of the end of the leaf again. Okay, so now I've faded out because I've done 2 passes at about 50%. Okay, the other thing that I might want to do is I might want to make it more rocky. So I think I'm going to actually choose a slightly smaller brush, and I'm going to set my source down here on this edge. And I'm doing so at the same place the leaf is because that should match the sharpness and the depth of field. Now this time I can go all the way across the leaf. Okay, so it's applying some of that stone pattern. And then to finish it off, I'm just going to go from this side and give a little bit more moss on that side. Now look what I've done. See, what happened was I clicked a couple of times and you can see that I've now got this double image of the moss. So you want to be very conscious of not doing that and cloning the same thing twice. Okay, so you don't want to replicate that moss over and over again. I'm going to do one more pass with the moss from here. And again, one more time. So you see that I'm constantly resetting that target tool so that I'm always pulling from a different area so that I'm not getting the repeat of the pattern. So now the leaf is sort of faded out and it looks like it blends a little bit better in with this brick. Okay, I might do one more pass from here. So if you're trying to use the cloning tool in one pass, you're not going to have as much success as if you build it up a little bit slowly. Now I'm going to do the opposite of what I just told you, and I'm going to go to 100% to clone out this area. So I'm going to set the target just outside of the white spot and click there, and then move down just a tiny little bit. Okay, so what's going to happen is it's going to follow me as I clone down. Okay, so you can see I did get a little bit of a repeat pattern there, but I could probably fix that quite easily. And just one more pass to get rid of that. So I'm always being aware of being careful of repeating the pattern, and I've kind of done not a great job there, but maybe I can take this moss and duplicate it over here. So you see how that works? I literally cloned this piece of moss over to there, and now it looks a little bit more natural and blended. Moving over to the other side of the image, there's a couple of other things that I want to remove. So these little leaves sticking out here is one of them. So I'm going to set my target just below them there and go up with my brush. So I'm painting straight up, and you can see that it keeps the edge that way. Okay, I'm going to do the same here, paint straight up. Again, I'm going to reset my target tool, and then I'm going to go down from the top this time. Okay, so make sure you're not duplicating until you get rid of it, and I should be lowering my opacity here. Didn't learn my lesson the first time. Okay. And like that. So I'm building up from all sides and removing the leaves slowly from each angle. This one at the top here, now this is just experience. I'm going to go with a higher opacity and try and do it more with one pass here, because I'm going to clone from this bottom area and go with a little bit larger brush. So I'm going to choose to go from there all the way up to here. Okay? So when I clone, it's literally just copying the moss from down there up here. And I'm going to do the same to get rid of this little highlight leaf there. And now you can see that the edge is nice and clean. There's one little highlight I want to get rid of here. And we'll just fix that one at the top. Right? So that's just experience. I know that I can go from further down here and go with one pass on that one. The only other thing that I might do is darken these little areas here on the edge of the concrete or step, just to darken it a bit. So I don't want to remove it. I'm just going to go with a lowered opacity brush just to get rid of that highlight. And the same over here. I'll do something like that. And I'm just ever so slightly darkening that so that it's not drawing attention. So to apply it, just click to close the tool and then zoom out. And now you can see that it's applied all the other tools and filters into those same areas. So the problem areas that we dealt with was the leaf here, which you can see is now gone. The white area here that is now gone. And these little highlights and things there and over here. And it looks pretty natural. So I've used the cloning tool for this example. I'll use the erase tool, which is the other one that you can try when you want to remove things. And it probably would have done a pretty good job on the leaf, but I wanted to show you the difference between the two. With the cloning tool, you can lower the opacity and just fade things so that you don't remove them completely. And I use that one a lot to take attention away from areas like those white spots, because these are the kinds of details in your photo editing that will take your image from being a good image to a great one. So be aware of the difference between the clone tool and the erase tool and how they apply. Clone tool, if you want to use it to tone things down and build it up gradually. The erase tool works a little bit differently. We'll see that one in a minute. In this next section of the Luminar AI tutorial, I'm going to show you how to correct for fog when your shooting conditions are less than optimal. This is the after or corrected image. This is how it appeared straight out of camera. So you can see that this was shot on a very rainy, misty, foggy day. This is actually the cathedral, which was the prison that Pablo Escobar was in just outside of Medellin, Colombia. So it's up in the hills, very misty, very rainy, and lack of contrast and detail in the image because of those shooting conditions. As a starting point, I've already applied some distortion and perspective corrections like you saw me do with the image of the winery to correct for the verticals. I've also added some structure AI, but I've directed it only to the rock wall and the tree that is nearest to the rock wall by painting it in with a mask. I demonstrated that in one of the earlier videos. So you can see whatever is red is where the structure AI is applying. If I turn the mask off and just toggle the tool off, look particularly at the detail in this wall here as I turn it on, And you can see that it's just enhancing the sharpness of the rocks and the concrete. Under the color panel, I used the Remove Color Cast, which is another great image fix if your image has a tint or a color cast that you don't like. Because of the odd lighting conditions, I wasn't able to find a good sort of white balance, so I tried the Remove Color Cast slider and it did a great job here automatically. Likewise, with the Details tool, I've applied a mask similar to what I did with Structure AI so that it just applies to that wall. So you can see with just those few edits, we've already got an improvement of the sharpness of the wall. Now I want to bring out a little bit more detail and contrast. Opening up the Light Tools panel, there's a couple of adjustments that I want to make here. And I'm going to turn on the histogram. So that's View, Histogram, if you're not sure where to find that. So even though the histogram is small, it gives me some information. It tells me where the pixels are laid out in terms of tone in this image. Not surprising, I see lots of white tones, lots of mid-tones, and there's nothing sort of in the dark shadow or black area. So that's what I'm going to add in the image using the sliders in the Light Tools panel. First I'm going to do is drag the black slider a bit to the left, and you can see that the histogram adjusts accordingly, and that gives me a bit deeper, richer, darker tones. I could do the same with the shadows as well. I'm going to leave that one alone. And you can see that just that one slider change already gives it a lot more contrast and punch. We can also try the Smart Contrast filter by increasing it. Let's go about 35 or so. I can bring the highlights down. So you can see there's a large spike here on the histogram in the light area, and that's that fog. So I can bring the highlights down. Now I'm never going to get detail in this back area because it was so foggy that there really was nothing to see. We could hardly see 10 feet in front of our faces. So I'm not going to get detail, but I'm going to bring it down a little bit. I do want to make sure that I have some nice white in the picture. If you want to turn on the clipping warnings, you can do so with the J key on the keyboard. So when I turn it up real high, you'll see that the whites start to clip. So what I do, a little trick is, I turn it up high, watch for the red highlight clipping warning, and then just style it down until I have none left, and I ended up at 24. If I want to have some black clipping, I could do the same. So anything that shows a blue tone is clipping in the black area. Now if I leave it all the way to -100, let's just have a look. Okay, so it's really deepened these blacks in here, and it's definitely enhanced the contrast of the image. I'm going to leave it at about -45, and I'll show you one other tool that we can use to do something similar. Moving down to the Landscape tool, so scroll down in the Essentials panel until you see Landscape. There's a slider called Dehaze. Well, if that isn't clear when to use it, this is when, right? So you have an image that's hazy or misty, use the Dehaze slider. So if I drag this Dehaze slider all the way to the right, you'll see that essentially what it's doing is very similar to what I just did with the black slider. So you can do one or the other or a combination of both. I'm going to settle somewhere in the middle on this one. Closing the Landscape tool, I want to go back down to the bottom under the Professional section again into this Lens and Geometry tool. Okay, there's one that we didn't talk about earlier. You'll notice that I have the auto distortion corrections already turned on, and that helps with that barrel distortion, again, because it was a wide angle lens. But I'm going to zoom in here and I'm going to show you what I'm seeing in terms of what's called chromatic aberration. So you'll notice that there's a little tick box here that says that, remove chromatic aberrations. So chromatic aberrations is an imperfection in a lens's ability to focus all of the colors together. So the red, green, and blue layers are not focused at the same point. So often you'll end up with either a magenta or a green fringe. I'm going to zoom into 100% here so you can really see it, because we've got both going on here. Can you see there's a green fringe on this side and a purple or magenta fringe on that side? So I'm just going to tick off this box and let's see what it does. So it's done a great job removing that green halo or fringe, okay? That is the chromatic aberration. Now there's still a purple fringe or outline. Going down into the advanced settings, you'll notice something called defringe and another checkbox. So let's click that. So what defringe is often when you are doing adjustments on a high contrast area like this, where you have something very white against something very dark, and you make some adjustments like pulling the highlights and so on, you'll end up with this color fringe. So if you use this tick box, you can get rid of that outer edge fringe of the colors. So I want to show you a little bit different before and after, because the lens distortion is also being corrected. I'm just going to go back a couple of history steps. So remember, you get to the history on the right hand side, the little clock icon. So I'm just going to step back 2 steps before I applied the lens geometry. Now you can see those color fringes back on both sides versus mostly gone. I mentioned copy and paste. Okay, there's a few ways that you can take the settings that you've done on one image and apply them to another image. I've talked about templates on day 1 and how to create your own and save your own edited templates. So that's one way to do it. But you can also simply copy and paste any adjustments. What you want to do is just right click anywhere on the image and you'll see this little pop-up menu appear. You can do things like show the histogram here, show in Finder, remove it from albums, and so on. But you want it, in this case, to go to Adjustments and then Copy. You'll notice that there's a keyboard shortcut, which is Command or Control C, very similar to if you're working in Microsoft Word or any other program. So we're going to copy the adjustments. Then we move over to a similar image that was shot in similar lighting conditions. This one was maybe a few minutes before or after the other one, and you can really see how foggy and how dense this mist was. So now you just right click and choose Adjustments, Paste. You can also get to this same menu up here, Copy and Paste, or you can use the keyboard shortcut, Command V. And boom, just like that, you can see that it's brought detail out in all areas. One thing that you want to look for is that if you've applied any masks like we did on the first image, they're going to be copied over as well in the same places. So in this case, it's not a match because it's a different scene. I'm just going to erase the parts that I don't want it to apply, like the background, so that it's only sharpening the wall once again. And then make sure that I paint in to get the parts of the wall that got missed with the other mask. Okay, so now that we're happy with the new mask, it's just a matter of, once again, copy it, go down to details, and paste it. So very quickly, I've taken this image from dull to having some detail. Now, these are not the most exciting images in the world, but I wanted to show you the concept of how you could take the settings from one image and apply them to another in a different way other than using templates. I have a couple more things to show you, so let's continue on the next image. Here's another image you may recognize from day 4, portrait editing, which we did yesterday. This one, I mentioned that I sharpened up the details, especially in her eyes and her face, because the image looked a little bit unsharp. So if I turn off this details tool, take a look at her eyes in particular, and look at how less sharp they are with the details turned off. See, everything is kind of mushy. So what I did with the details tool is cranked up the small details slider quite high. It's currently at 86. So what that does is it looks for the really tiny details, like things like her eyelashes and her eyebrows and the details in her beadwork on her headdress. But what happened was, when I applied it to the entire image, it also sharpened the noise in the background of the image. So let me show you what this looks like without the mask, because I've actually painted this one in using the mask. So you can see where I've added it just to her headpiece, her lips, and her eyes, keeping it out of her teeth and her eye whites for a particular purpose. Because when I turn this mask off, meaning if I click fill on this paint mask, it will apply this tool or details tool everywhere in the image. So now can you see how really sort of grainy the overall image is, including her face? Let me zoom into 200%. When I zoom into this level, you can see that indeed it is doing a nice job on the eye sharpening, but you can also see that there's a lot of grain here. And I've applied the skin smoothing, so I want to keep her skin as smooth as possible and not have all this noise and grain. So by adding this mask in, now I did the little copy trick earlier, I'm just going to paste it back in. You can see that now this tool is just affecting the eyes and her costume. Let me zoom back out. So it's only affecting the parts of the image that I want to appear sharper without adding that extra grain. Let's take one more look of the before. See how dull her eyes are and a little bit blurry? When the eyes of the subject are sharp or appear sharp, the image looks sharp. So use this little trick in the details tool, including sharpen. Watch for the sharpen masking down here in the bottom panel. Turn it up a little bit higher. Sharpen masking, the higher you go, it's going to try and keep the details out of areas that you don't want it. Again, that's going to be skin and sky areas. I had it set quite high at about 85. Let's move on to the last image for today's lesson and carry on with the topic of noise reduction. In this final image, I've already applied some of the same tools that I used earlier on the image with the fog, in order to reduce the sun flare in the upper right corner, which you see here. This is the before image. You'll notice a lack of general contrast, which is caused by the light hitting the lens directly. So when you're shooting, do make sure that you use a lens hood and try to avoid this type of scenario, but sometimes it happens. So if you want to bring back the contrast in your image that has lens flare, use that dehaze slider, increase the blacks, and use the structure tool to do so. In the previous image of the Japanese temple in the moss, I used the clone and stamp tool. This time I'm going to use the erase tool. It's the third one down in the essentials panel. So remember, you want to zoom in to 100% whenever you're using any of these tools. And what I'm going to do is fix these two little problems right here and see if it can fix a bigger problem as well. You only have one slider to deal with here, and that is basically your brush size. You can increase it and decrease it with the square bracket keys as you can any of the others. So when you're using this tool, all you have to do is highlight or click on the spot you want to erase. Make sure that you have the select option chosen, not deselect. And I'm just going to highlight these two spots and then click erase. And what the program is going to do is analyze the pixels around the spots where you've highlighted and try and fill it in with what it thinks is correct. Let's see how it does. And there you have it. 2 clicks and we're done. The next one I want to do is see how we can deal with this cord coming out of the bottom of this lantern. I want to see if it can handle something a little bit bigger. So I have a brush that is slightly bigger than the cord. You want to make sure that you sample or highlight around the area because it needs to know what to fill it with. So I'm going to highlight the cord and just a little bit into that bottom edge of that lantern. Click erase and wait for the magic. Wow, I have to say that's pretty impressive. The only thing I might do is just try and get rid of this little white dot right here. And I'm just splitting hairs with these tiny little edits to clean it up a little bit. Like I mentioned with the image of the moss, these tiny kinds of details can take your image to the next level. So now those 2 spots are removed as well. To finish up with the tool, just close it and zoom out. One tip I will give you when using the erase tool is do less spots at a time. Do 1 or 2 or 3. Do the erase part and then do a few more. Because if it doesn't do a good job, you can just undo with Command Z or Z to undo that one step. If you've done 10 or 20 or 30 spots, you have to do them all over again. So do it in little bits. The last thing I want to look at in this image is details like we did with the image of the girl. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to take this to extreme for a couple of reasons. I want to show you that yes, indeed, I can sharpen this image, but because it was shot at a fairly high ISO, you see what else happens is it starts to make a lot of noise. So the noise is there in the high ISO image, but you're now actually sharpening the noise, if that makes sense. Because when you're dealing with the small details slider, noise becomes those small details as well. So go easy on the small details. And to increase sharpness in an image that has lots of noise, use the medium. I'm going to go up to about 70 and see what that does. The other thing that I often do is I will take large details, which is things like the orange column here or the sky, and I'll actually take that to a negative. So I'll go minus on the large details, and that will actually help soften the noise in those areas. Sharpen slider, again, same thing. If you go all this way up to the top, you're going to be sharpening the noise. So keep it a little bit on the lower side, and you're going to have to do a dance. So there's lots of dancing in photo editing, apparently, as we've learned this week. So you have to dance between adding contrast and removing saturation. And the same thing happens here with increasing details and then adding denoise, which we're going to do next. So the next tool down is the denoise tool. It's comprised of two kinds of noise: luminosity, which doesn't have any color, and then color noise, if you see any sort of different pixels that are different colors. I'm going to take these all as far as we can go, again, to prove a point. When you take the denoise sliders all the way to the top, what ends up happening is you get rid of lots of noise, but you also end up removing a lot of sharpness. So I have to go back to details, maybe add a little bit more sharpening, and increase maybe this or this one. Okay, so it's back and forth between the sharpening and the denoise. Let's look at the before either of them. So this is before all of them, and after. Okay, so there still is noise there, but remember, we're looking at this image at 100%. So keep in mind that you're never going to be viewing that image this close, especially if you're doing things like posting on social media and so on. You're never going to be zooming into the details at 100 or 200%. In the final image, I'm going to do that dance again and just check on my whites and the blacks. Maybe I'll give it a little bit more black just to enhance the deep and rich color, and bring the highlights down so I've got all detail in this area up here. I'm not so worried about these bits in the top here, if there's any parts clipping on the highlights, because it's up near the light source. Final image before, a little bit dull and flat because of the lens flare. So we've handled the lens flare and the noise in this image and still managed to maintain sharpness where we want it. Make sure you download this image and the one with the fog for today's lesson and use them along with the ones from days 1 to 4 to practice these corrective edits. If you want to watch more Luminar AI tutorials, just click here. If you want to go back to day 1 and start the challenge from the beginning, just click here. Please remember to like the video, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Take care.